Tonight, the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art glittered with New York's elite. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, buzzed with the low hum of powerful conversations. But all of that stopped. A hush fell over the crowd, a collective intake of breath as the doors opened one last time. It wasn't a politician or a movie star that commanded such silence. It was Lachlan Beaumont, the notoriously private tech billionaire, a man who moved markets with a single memo. But it wasn't him that made them gasp. It was the woman on his arm, elegant, poised with a smile that held a universe of secrets. Whispers turned into a frantic search of memories. "Who is that?" one socialite hissed. Then a prominent real estate developer, Michael Brown, dropped his champagne flute. The crystal shattered on the marble floor, a sound as loud as a gunshot in the sudden quiet. He knew exactly who she was. She was the woman he'd thrown away like yesterday's news. She was his ex-wife. Rosemary Davies believed in the quiet magic of building a life. For 7 years that life was built around Michael Brown. She had met him when he was a junior architect with wild dreams and blueprints that covered every inch of their tiny Brooklyn apartment. She was the one who brewed his coffee at 3 a.m., who typed his proposals, who believed in his vision of glass and steel towers long before a single foundation was ever laid. She put her own dreams, a forgotten sketchbook filled with elegant furniture designs and bold interior concepts, into a dusty box under their bed. His dream was her dream, and for a time, it was enough. Michael's star began to rise slowly at first, then with dizzying speed. His firm Brown Designs landed a prestigious contract for a midtown skyscraper. Suddenly, their world changed. The tiny Brooklyn apartment was traded for a sterile minimalist penthouse overlooking Central Park. Dinners of takeout eaten on the floor were replaced by charity galas where Rosemary felt like a wilting flower in a room of exotic, thorny blooms. She tried to keep up. She bought the right dresses, learned the names of the right people, and perfected a smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. But she could feel Michael slipping away. He began to look at her not with love, but with assessment. He'd critique her choice of jewelry, the way she engaged in small talk, the fact that she preferred a quiet night in to another deafening social event. "You're not trying, Rose," he said one evening, loosening a tie that cost more than their first month's rent. Brittany Adler was there tonight. Her father sits on the board of the Van Doren Group. She knew everyone. She connects. Rosemary's heart clenched. Brittany Adler was a fixture in the society pages, a woman who seemed born in a couture gown. "I'm not Brittany, Gregg. I'm the woman who believed in you when you were sketching on napkins." "Exactly," he said, and the coldness in his voice was a physical blow. "You're the woman from the before. I'm living in the after now." The final conversation happened a month later. It wasn't a fight. There was no shouting. It was worse. It was a business transaction. Michael sat her down on their white leather sofa, a piece she had always hated, and laid out his terms. "This isn't working," he began, avoiding her gaze. "I've achieved a certain status, and my partner needs to reflect that. It's about image, about branding. You understand business, Rose." "I'm not a brand, Michael. I'm your wife," she whispered, her hands trembling in her lap. "And I appreciate everything you've done," he said, the words practiced and hollow. "But I've outgrown this. I've outgrown us." He finally looked at her, and his eyes held a mixture of pity and impatience. "Look at you, Rose. You're sweet. You're comfortable. But you don't have that fire, that ambition. You're content to be in the background. I need someone who shines in the spotlight beside me." She felt the blood drain from her face. Every sacrifice, every late night, every ounce of faith she had poured into him was being dismissed as a lack of ambition. He was erasing her from his own success story. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice cracking. 7 years just over? I've been seeing Brittany." He admitted the final nail in the coffin. "She understands my world. It's for the best, Rose. I'll be fair in the divorce. You'll be comfortable. Comfortable. The word was an insult. He was offering her a severance package for a life she had co-authored. She looked around the cold, impersonal penthouse. He had designed a space that had never felt like home. She saw nothing of herself in it. He had already erased her. She walked out with one suitcase and the dusty box from under the bed. She didn't look back. As the divorce papers were finalized, she saw the announcement in a society magazine: Architect Michael Brown and socialite Brittany Adler, the city's new power couple. The photograph showed them laughing, clinking champagne glasses at a gallery opening. Michael looked triumphant. He had his trophy, his brand, his woman who shone in the spotlight. Rosemary Davies, meanwhile, was left with the crushing realization that he hadn't just left her. He had made her feel worthless, like a rough draft he'd crumpled up and tossed aside on his way to the finished masterpiece. And in the suffocating loneliness of a cheap motel room far from the city lights, she finally opened the dusty box and stared at the forgotten dreams inside. The noise of New York was a constant mocking reminder of the life she'd lost. Rosemary knew she couldn't heal there. She needed silence. She needed the ocean. With the modest settlement from the divorce enough to live on for a year if she was careful, she drove north with no destination in mind until the scent of salt and pine filled the air. She found herself in Kennebunkport, Maine, a small coastal town that was the complete antithesis of her former life. She rented a small weathered cottage overlooking a rocky shore. The first month was a blur of grief. She walked the beach for hours, letting the cold Atlantic wind whip tears from her eyes. The woman Michael had described plain, unambitious background noise haunted her. Had he been right? Had she truly become nothing more than a shadow? One rainy afternoon, trapped inside with the sound of waves crashing against the shore, she finally opened the sketchbook. Her fingers, hesitant at first, traced the lines of chairs inspired by seashells, tables that mimicked the flow of water, and lighting fixtures that looked like captured starlight. A flicker of the old Rosemary, the girl with dreams before Michael, ignited within her. She started small. She found a discarded broken rocking chair at a local flea market. For a week she worked tirelessly on it in her small garage, sanding the old wood, reinforcing the joints, and reupholstering it with a simple, elegant gray linen. When she was done, it was no longer a piece of junk. It was a work of art, a blend of rustic charm and modern minimalism. She placed it by her window, and for the first time in months, she felt a sliver of pride. Her work became her therapy. She started frequenting local antique shops and estate sales, finding broken, unloved pieces of furniture and breathing new life into them. Her cottage slowly transformed from a barren rental into a curated space of beauty and comfort, a home that was uniquely hers. One day, while sketching in a local coffee shop, a man paused by her table. She was so absorbed in her drawing of a new bookcase design that she didn't notice him at first. "That's a clever use of tension rods," he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. Rosemary looked up, startled. The man was dressed simply in a worn flannel shirt and jeans, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He had a quiet intensity about him. He didn't look like a tourist. "Oh, thank you," she said, instinctively closing her sketchbook. "Please don't," he said, gesturing to the book. "I'm sorry to interrupt. My name is Lachlan." He offered a hand. His grip was firm. "Rosemary," she replied. "You're not from around here," he stated, not unkindly. "Is it that obvious?" she asked with a small wry smile. "Only because I know just about everyone else," he chuckled. "I have a place up the coast. I come here to escape." "Escape what?" she asked, intrigued. "Noise," he said simply. "Meetings. Expectations." "You—" "The same, I suppose," she said, the understatement hanging in the air. Lachlan pointed again at her sketchbook. "You're an architect, a designer." "I wanted to be an interior designer," she confessed. "A long time ago." He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes and didn't press. Instead, he asked about her design, and for the next hour they talked, really talked, not about society or status or branding, but about the integrity of old-growth wood, the beauty of clean lines, and the way a room could make you feel. He listened with a focused attention that made Rosemary feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. They began to meet regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for long walks on the beach. He never asked about her past, and she never asked about his. He was just Lachlan, the quiet man from up the coast, who understood the language of design and saw the passion in her work. He saw her Rosemary, not the ex-wife of Michael Brown. One afternoon he came to her cottage to help her fix a leaky faucet. When he stepped inside, he stopped dead in his tracks. He walked slowly through the small space, his eyes taking in every detail: the restored rocking chair, the reclaimed driftwood coffee table, the way she'd arranged the lighting to create a sense of warmth and peace. "Rosemary," he said, his voice filled with genuine awe. "This is incredible. You didn't just furnish a house, you gave it a soul." He turned to her, his gaze serious. "The world needs to see this. This talent you have is a gift." Rosemary felt a blush creep up her neck. "It's just a hobby." "No," Lachlan said firmly. "It's a vocation. Have you ever thought of starting your own business?" She laughed, a sad, bitter sound. "With what I have enough money to last another 6 months, maybe. Starting a business takes capital connections. Everything I don't have." Lachlan was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying her with an unreadable expression. "What if you did?" he asked quietly. "What if you had an investor? Someone who believed in your vision completely?" "People like that don't just fall out of the sky, Lachlan." "Perhaps one just did," he said, his voice steady. "Let me be your first client. I have a guest house on my property that's a complete wreck. I want you to redesign it, carte blanche, and let me be your first investor. We'll draw up a business plan, create a proper company. I'm not offering a handout, Rosemary. I'm offering a partnership. I think it would be a very, very wise investment." Rosemary stared at him, speechless. This quiet man in a flannel shirt was talking about investment capital and business plans as if it were the most natural thing in the world. For the first time, a wild, terrifying seed of hope began to take root in the barren soil of her heart. She wasn't just Michael Brown's discarded past. She was a designer, an artist, and someone finally saw it. "Okay," she whispered the word, feeling monumental. "Okay, Lachlan, let's do it." The guesthouse project was a whirlwind. Lachlan, true to his word, gave her complete creative freedom. The structure was a beautiful old stone building that had fallen into disrepair. Rosemary poured all of her rediscovered passion into it. She sourced materials from local artisans, designed custom furniture, and spent her days covered in sawdust and paint, feeling more alive than she had in a decade. Lachlan was a constant, quiet presence. He'd bring her coffee in the mornings and review blueprints with her in the evenings. He never interfered, but he challenged her. "Are you sure that's the boldest you can be?" he'd ask, pushing her to trust her instincts. Their professional partnership deepened into a personal one built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared love for creating something beautiful out of nothing. During this time, the true scope of Lachlan's life began to reveal itself, not through his words, but through the quiet efficiency with which things happened. When she needed a rare type of reclaimed wood, a truck carrying it arrived from Oregon 2 days later. When she worried about the legalities of forming a company, a high-powered lawyer from Boston called to walk her through the process. One evening, looking up a detail for a supplier, she casually Googled his full name, Lachlan Beaumont. The screen filled with articles from Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Wired. Tech titan Lachlan Beaumont, the reclusive billionaire behind Aura AI. Beaumont Philanthropies pledges billions to green energy. She felt the floor drop out from under her. The quiet man in the flannel shirt who helped her fix her faucet was one of the wealthiest, most influential men in the world. She felt a surge of panic. This was the world she had run from, a world of power and status far beyond even Michael's wildest ambitions. She confronted him that night, her heart pounding. "You're Lachlan Beaumont," she said, holding up her phone. He didn't flinch. He just met her gaze, his own calm and steady. Yes, he said. Does that change anything? It changes everything, she exclaimed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to know me, Lachlan, the man who loves the smell of sawdust and thinks your design for that reading nook is genius, he said, stepping closer. I didn't want you to see the billion-dollar portfolio. I wanted you to see me, the same way I saw you, not as someone's ex-wife, but as the incredibly talented artist standing right in front of me. His sincerity disarmed her. He hadn't hidden his identity to deceive her, but to protect the authenticity of their connection. In that moment, she realized the profound difference between him and Michael. Michael used his status as a weapon and a measure of worth. Lachlan saw it as a responsibility and often a burden to be escaped. She stayed. And her company, which she named Tidal Design, was born. The completed guest house was a masterpiece. It was a perfect fusion of rustic Maine charm and breathtaking modern luxury. Lachlan invited a few friends who turned out to be Silicon Valley CEOs and international art collectors for a weekend unveiling. They were blown away. By the end of the weekend, Tidal Design had 3 new clients each with a multi-million-dollar project. Word of mouth in those ultra-exclusive circles was more powerful than any advertising campaign. Rosemary's aesthetic, authentic, soulful, and impeccably detailed was a breath of fresh air in a world of sterile, ostentatious wealth. She hired a small, dedicated team and set up a proper studio in Portland. Her personal transformation was just as profound. The success wasn't just Lachlan's money. It was her vision, her hard work. Her confidence, once shattered, was now forged in the fires of her own achievements. She traded her worn-out sweaters for tailored blazers and bespoke dresses. Her posture changed. She walked into boardrooms and construction sites with an air of quiet authority. She was no longer a shadow. She was the light. She and Lachlan fell deeply in love. It was a mature, peaceful love, free of the drama and insecurity that had defined her marriage. With him, she felt not like an accessory but a partner. He celebrated her successes as if they were his own, and listened to her fears without judgment. About a year and a half after she'd fled New York, Lachlan came to her with a proposal that made her blood run cold. Beaumont Enterprises just acquired the old Sinclair Hotel on Park Avenue, he said, spreading a huge blueprint across her desk. It's a landmark building, but it's been gutted by neglect. We're turning it into the most exclusive private residence in the city, the Beaumont. Her eyes scanned the massive project scope. It was an architect's dream, a designer's magnum opus. It's an incredible project, Lachlan, she said, her voice tight. I know, he said, his eyes twinkling. And I've told my board there's only one firm I trust to handle the interior architecture and design for the entire building. He paused, his gaze softening. Tidal Design. Rosemary stared at him, her mind reeling. New York, Park Avenue. It was the heart of the world she had run from, the world of Michael and Brittany. This wasn't just a project, it was a reckoning. It meant returning to the city that had broken her not as a victim, but as a force to be reckoned with. This will put you on the global stage, Rose, Lachlan said gently, sensing her hesitation. This isn't about looking back. This is about claiming your future, in the very place that tried to tell you that you didn't have one. She looked from the blueprint to the determined, loving face of the man beside her. He was right. Running had saved her, but returning would define her. Okay, she said, a slow, determined smile spreading across her face. Let's show New York what Tidal Design can do. The Beaumont project was a monster, a glorious, all-consuming beast. For months, Rosemary and her team were immersed in the monumental task. They flew between Maine and New York weekly, setting up a satellite office in a sleek Soho loft. Rosemary was no longer the woman who shied away from the city. She strode its streets with purpose, commanding meetings with contractors, artisans, and city officials. She was decisive, creative, and utterly in her element. The New York real estate and design world was a small, incestuous community. Whispers began to circulate about the mysterious new firm that had snagged the most coveted design contract of the decade. Tidal Design never heard of them. They're from Maine, of all places. I heard Lachlan Beaumont's new girlfriend is running it. A classic case of nepotism. Rosemary heard the rumors. They stung, but they didn't stop her. She knew the quality of her work would be the only answer that mattered. She poured every ounce of her talent into the project, creating spaces that were not just luxurious, but also deeply human and breathtakingly innovative. As the project neared its first major milestone, the invitation arrived. It was printed on thick cream-colored cardstock, the lettering an elegant gold foil. The annual Metropolitan Architectural Guild Gala, the absolute apex of the industry's social calendar. It was being held, as always, in the grand halls of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The keynote speaker this year, Michael Brown. Rosemary's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the invitation. It felt like a trap, a deliberately engineered collision. "We don't have to go," Lachlan said that evening, finding her staring out the window of their temporary suite at the Carlisle Hotel, the invitation on the table beside her. "Yes, we do," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "My company is the lead on the biggest residential project in the city. Brown Designs is a major player. If I don't show up, they'll say I'm hiding. They'll say the rumors are true, that I'm just the billionaire's pet project. I've worked too hard to let them think that." "This isn't about them, Rose," he said, turning her to face him. "This is about you. Are you ready to face him?" She thought for a long moment, recalling the broken woman who had fled the city 2 years ago. She was gone. In her place was a woman who had built a company, who had found love, who had rediscovered herself. "I'm not the same person," he knew Lachlan. Let him see that. The night of the gala was a flurry of preparation. Rosemary had chosen her armor carefully. It was a gown by a little-known designer she admired, a column of deep emerald silk that clung to her silhouette. It was elegant and powerful, not ostentatious. Her hair was swept up in a graceful chignon, and the only jewelry she wore was a pair of diamond earrings, a gift from Lachlan that glittered like captured stars. As she looked at her reflection, she saw a stranger and herself all at once. The familiar shape of her face, but with new lines of confidence around her eyes, and a strength in her jaw she hadn't possessed before. Lachlan entered the room impeccably dressed in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He stopped and simply stared, his expression one of pure adoration. "The world is going to stop turning tonight, Rosemary," he murmured, offering his arm. As their car pulled up to the museum's grand entrance, a sea of flashing cameras erupted. The press went wild at the sight of the reclusive Lachlan Beaumont. "Mr. Beaumont, who are you with tonight?" they shouted. Lachlan leaned down to the reporters, his voice calm and clear, a protective hand on Rosemary's back. "I am here tonight in support of the most talented designer in the country," he said, his voice carrying over the din. "This is Ms. Rosemary Davies, founder and lead designer of Tidal Design." He didn't call her his girlfriend or his partner. He called her a designer. He gave her the credit, the professional respect she had earned. With his words as her shield, she took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and walked with him up the stone steps and into the lion's den. The grand hall was precisely as Rosemary remembered, a swirling kaleidoscope of black ties, glittering gowns, and forced laughter. Heads turned the moment they entered. A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd as people recognized Lachlan Beaumont. Their eyes then slid to the woman on his arm, a picture of grace and understated power. There was a flicker of confusion, then dawning recognition on a few faces. From across the room, Michael Brown stood at the center of a fawning circle of admirers, Brittany Adler preening at his side. He was holding court, a glass of champagne in one hand, gesturing grandly as he spoke about his firm's latest visionary project. Brittany, draped in a garish diamond-encrusted red gown, laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. Someone from his circle noticed the commotion at the entrance and nudged him. "Greg, look. Isn't that Lachlan Beaumont? I wonder who he's with." Michael turned, a condescending smile on his face, ready to dismiss another social climber. The smile froze, then melted away, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His hand went slack. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was sharp, definitive. It cut through the chatter, drawing every eye in their vicinity. And in the ensuing silence, everyone followed his stunned gaze to the woman standing beside the most powerful man in the room. It was Rosemary. But it wasn't. The mousy, agreeable woman he had cast aside was gone. This woman was luminous. Her confidence was a palpable aura, more dazzling than Brittany's diamonds. She met his gaze from across the room, and there was no pain in her eyes, no anger. There was nothing. It was the calm, polite disinterest one reserves for a stranger. That look more than anything gutted him. The crowd began to buzz, the pieces clicking into place. "That's his ex-wife." The word spread like wildfire. "Rosemary Brown." "No. Someone said her name is Davies now." "What is she doing with him?" Brittany's perfectly made-up face contorted with jealousy and confusion. "Greg, what is it? Who is that?" she demanded, her voice shrill. But Michael couldn't hear her. He was trapped, mesmerized by the ghost of the woman he thought he'd erased. Slowly, as if pulled by an invisible string, he and Brittany began to walk towards them. The crowd parted, sensing the impending drama. "Rose," Michael said, his voice hoarse as they came face to face. I can't believe it's you." Rosemary gave him a cool, placid smile. "It's Rosemary Davies now, Michael. It's good to see you're well," she said, her tone perfectly even. She then turned her gaze to the woman beside him. "Brittany, that's a vibrant dress." The subtle barb hit its mark. Brittany flushed a deep red, suddenly feeling cheap and overwrought next to Rosemary's effortless elegance. "What are you doing here?" Michael stammered, his eyes darting from Rosemary to the impassive billionaire beside her. Before Rosemary could answer, Lachlan extended a hand to Michael, his grip like steel. "Lachlan Beaumont. You must be Michael Brown. I've heard your name." His tone was polite, but with an underlying current of ice. "Rosemary and I are here this evening as guests of the Guild. Her firm Tidal Design is handling the Beaumont project on Park Avenue." The second shockwave hit Michael even harder than the first. The Beaumont project, the most talked about, most prestigious, most ludicrously well-funded development in a generation. It was the contract every top-tier firm in the world, including his own, had been salivating over, and it had gone to her, to the unambitious woman he'd left behind. His professional arrogance warred with his personal disbelief. "Tidal Design," he repeated dumbly. I didn't know you had a company." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Michael," Rosemary said, her voice still quiet but now laced with a confidence that cut him to the quick. "I was busy building a life, not just an image." The color drained from Michael's face. Her words were a direct echo of his own cruel dismissal of her years ago. He looked at her, poised, successful, loved by a man whose influence dwarfed his own, and for the first time he felt the crushing weight of his mistake. It wasn't just regret. It was a chasm of loss opening up beneath him. He hadn't just thrown away a wife. He'd thrown away a diamond, convinced it was a common stone. And as he stood there, speechless and shattered, the whole of New York's high society watched and gasped. The morning after the gala, New York's digital society pages were a blazing inferno of speculation and shock. The image was everywhere: Michael Brown, his face a mask of disbelief; Brittany Adler, a study in scarlet-clad fury; and across from them, Rosemary Davies, serene and luminous on the arm of Lachlan Beaumont. The shattered champagne flute had become the defining symbol of the night, a crystal metaphor for a carefully constructed world falling to pieces. For Rosemary, the sudden glare of the spotlight was unnerving. Over coffee in their hotel suite, Lachlan scrolled through the headlines on a tablet, a wry smile on his face. "It seems you've become the city's favorite mystery," he murmured. Rosemary looked at a photo of herself, her expression calm and unreadable, and felt a strange disconnect. The victory was sweet, but the public nature of it left a bitter aftertaste. She had returned to prove her worth through her work, not to become the protagonist in a high society soap opera about her ex-husband. "I don't want this to be about him," she said quietly, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "The work should be the story." "It will be," Lachlan assured her, his voice a comforting anchor. But a story this good, people can't resist the opening chapter. Now it's your job to make the rest of the book so compelling they forget how it began. For Michael, however, there was no escaping the opening chapter. It was a public crucifixion. He walked into his gleaming office at Brown Designs to a chorus of strained "good mornings." He could feel the change in atmosphere. The air, once thick with deference, was now heavy with pity and morbid curiosity. His partners avoided his gaze. His assistant spoke in hushed, careful tones. The entire incident had painted him not as a powerful man who had moved on, but as a fool who hadn't recognized the value of what he'd thrown away. The narrative was a direct assault on his greatest asset, his infallible judgment. His nights were worse. The minimalist penthouse, once a proud symbol of his success, now felt like a vast, empty mausoleum. Brittany's presence did little to fill the void. She was a ghost of a different sort, rattling the chains of their shared public humiliation. He would sit in the dark for hours, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face as he obsessively consumed every article, every blog post, every scrap of information he could find on Tidal Design. He studied Rosemary's portfolio with a sickening mix of awe and self-loathing. Her work was everything his had ceased to be: warm, innovative, deeply personal. He saw her soul in the curve of a chair, her intelligence in the clever use of space. He saw the woman he had dismissed as simple and unambitious, and realized he had been looking at her with his eyes closed. The ambition had been there all along, a quiet, powerful force he had been too arrogant to see. This realization didn't inspire remorse. It ignited a dark, corrosive envy that began to consume him. His obsession became the third person in his relationship with Brittany. Every conversation became a minefield. "The Carlton Group is looking for a new firm for their headquarters," Brittany said one evening, trying to inject some normalcy into their strained dinner. "Your firm should be a shoe-in." "They'll probably go with Tidal Design," Michael muttered into his wineglass. "Everyone wants the visionary of the moment." The word was coated in sarcasm, but the bitterness was real. Brittany finally threw her napkin down, her carefully maintained composure shattering. "Stop it. Just stop talking about her. You're the one who didn't want her. Remember, you chose me. Or was I just a convenient upgrade, Michael? Don't be ridiculous." He snapped, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. "Am I?" She pressed, her voice rising. "Look at me, Michael. When you look at me, what do you even see anymore?" He finally looked up, his gaze distant and unfocused. "You're looking through me," she whispered, the chilling realization dawning on her. "You're looking right through me at her ghost." He didn't deny it. In that moment, Brittany understood. She had never been the prize. She was a placeholder, an accessory chosen to match a certain lifestyle. Now that a far more valuable accessory had appeared, she had been rendered worthless in his eyes. Her status, her connections, everything she had brought to the table meant nothing compared to the one thing: she could never be the woman he so obviously, tragically wished he had back. Festering in his professional and personal ruin, Michael's envy curdled into a desire to destroy. He couldn't out-design her, so he would cripple her. He began to pull the insidious, invisible strings of influence he had spent a decade cultivating. A call to a friend at the Department of Buildings resulted in a sudden week-long stop work order on the Beaumont project, citing a trivial zoning variance. A quiet word with a union foreman led to a mysterious labor slowdown. Key shipments of imported materials were suddenly lost in customs, tangled in a web of red tape that hadn't existed a week prior. Rosemary and her team felt the pressure immediately. Each problem in isolation was a typical construction headache, but together they formed a pattern of deliberate, malicious interference. "This isn't bad luck," Lachlan said one evening, reviewing a spreadsheet of the escalating costs from the delays. "This is a targeted campaign. This has Michael's fingerprints all over it." Rosemary felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly replaced by a steely resolve. "He thinks he can bleed us out with 1,000 paper cuts," she said, her jaw tight. "He's forgotten that I'm the one who used to manage his budgets. I know how to handle a crisis. If he wants to fight me in the trenches, he'll find out I learned how to build." The final straw for Brittany came a week later. She came home late to find Michael hunched over his desk, not with his own blueprints but with a set of documents she didn't recognize. They were sleek, professional, and bore the elegant watermark of Tidal Design. It was their proposal for the new Vanguard corporate headquarters, a contract known to be the next big prize in the industry. She watched as he analyzed it, his expression not angry but predatory. He was dissecting it, memorizing it, preparing to consume it and regurgitate it as his own. He was going to steal her work. In that moment, Brittany felt the last vestige of her connection to him sever. It wasn't just about his obsession with Rosemary anymore. It was about his fundamental emptiness. He was a fraud, a hollow man so desperate to maintain his image that he would resort to theft. She had attached her name, her reputation to a sinking ship captained by a coward. Her decision was not born of morality or a sudden kinship with Rosemary. It was a cold, calculated act of self-preservation and vengeance. He wanted a mirror. She would show him the reflection of his own destruction. The next afternoon, Rosemary was at the Beaumont construction site, deep in a heated discussion with her site manager, when her personal cell phone buzzed with an unlisted number. She stepped away from the noise, expecting a supplier. "Is this Rosemary Davies?" The voice was clipped, manicured, and instantly recognizable. Rosemary's back stiffened. "It is. Who is this?" "It's Brittany Adler." A heavy silence descended. "What do you want, Brittany?" Rosemary asked, her voice cautious. "I'm not calling to exchange pleasantries," Brittany said, her tone brittle as glass. "I'm calling to give you a warning. Michael is playing dirty. He's not just trying to delay you. He's going after the Vanguard account." "What do you mean?" "He has a copy of your preliminary proposal. I don't know how paid off a junior designer hacked a server, I don't care. He's planning to use your core concepts, the sustainable atrium, the modular workspace design, and present them as his own in his final pitch tomorrow. He'll claim you stole the ideas from him, banking on his reputation to crush yours." Rosemary felt the ground shift beneath her feet. It was a vile, career-ending accusation. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, the question hanging heavy between them. There was a pause, and for a moment Rosemary could hear the faint sound of a shaky breath. "Don't mistake this for friendship," Brittany said, her voice dripping with a venom meant solely for Michael. "I'm just lighting the match. He's the one who soaked his own house in gasoline. I finally realized he never wanted a partner. He just wants a mirror, and his reflection is starting to look very, very ugly. Let him crash and burn. He deserves it." The line went dead. Rosemary stood amidst the dust and noise of the rising skyscraper, the phone feeling like a block of ice in her hand. Brittany hadn't offered her an olive branch. She had handed her a weapon of mass destruction. The game had just changed. This was no longer a war of attrition. It was time for a final, decisive move. The click of the disconnected call was deafening in the sudden silence of Rosemary's hotel suite. She stood frozen. The phone still pressed to her ear, Brittany Adler's final venomous words echoing in the space where a conversation had been. It wasn't the shock of the source she had long suspected, the cracks in Michael and Brittany's gilded cage, but the sheer, unadulterated treachery of the act itself. Michael, the man whose early dreams she had nurtured like fragile flames, was preparing to burn her to the ground with an inferno of her own making. It was a violation that went deeper than professional sabotage. He was trying to steal her voice, her vision, the very essence of the woman she had fought so hard to become. For a fleeting moment, the ghost of the old Rosemary surfaced, the woman who would have crumpled, who would have cried, who would have accepted defeat as her due. The air left her lungs in a ragged gasp. But then something else took over. A cold, crystalline anger began to form in her chest, sharp and clear. It was not the hot, messy rage of a woman scorned, but the focused, righteous fury of a creator defending her creation. He had mistaken her kindness for weakness for the last time. She didn't hesitate. She called Lachlan, her voice devoid of panic, clipped and precise. "Get the core team. Meet me at the Soho office in 30 minutes. We have a problem. The office, usually quiet in the late evening, was soon buzzing with a tense energy. As Rosemary laid out the situation, the faces of her small, loyal team shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to collective outrage. Her lead architect, a young prodigy named Ben, slammed a fist on the conference table. "He can't do that. It's intellectual property theft." "He can and he will," Rosemary stated, her calm silencing the room. "He's banking on his established name against ours. By the time we could prove it in court, the damage would be done. Our reputation would be tainted before it's even truly forged." Lachlan stood by the window, his expression unreadable but his stillness radiating a dangerous calm. He didn't step in to take over. He watched her, his trust in her absolute. "What's the play, Rose?" he asked, his voice low. Rosemary turned to the large whiteboard that dominated the wall, uncapping a black marker. "Michael has our battle plan. He thinks he knows how we'll attack. So we don't attack. We render the entire battlefield obsolete." She looked at the faces of her team, seeing the exhaustion and fear warring with loyalty. "He's expecting a fight. We're going to give him a revolution. We are not saving our proposal. We are making it redundant. Tonight, we create Vanguard 2.0. A spark ignited in the room. The challenge, impossible and insane, was also intoxicating. For the next 8 hours, the office transformed into a high-stakes creative incubator. Fueled by gallons of coffee and a shared sense of purpose, they tore their own brilliant design apart to rebuild it into something no one, least of all Michael, could ever have conceived. Lachlan worked the phones, coordinating with his West Coast tech teams and his top patent lawyers who worked through the night securing the rights to every new innovation they devised. Ben and the architectural team sketched furiously, integrating responsive architecture that physically shifted based on occupancy and time of day. Rosemary, at the heart of the storm, was a whirlwind of decisive creativity, connecting disparate ideas, refining every concept, ensuring that every new element was not just a gimmick, but a meaningful improvement that served the design's core soul. Around 3 a.m., she stepped away for a moment, looking out the window at the sleeping city. She wasn't just fighting for a contract. She was fighting for the woman who had found her worth in a small Maine cottage, for the team that believed in her, for the love that had given her the space to grow. This wasn't about Michael anymore. This was about her. She would not let his shadow dim the light she had worked so hard to build. The next morning, as the sun cast long shadows across the city, they had it. A proposal so advanced, so complete, it made their original submission look like a relic. Rosemary felt the deep, bone-weary exhaustion, but beneath it, a powerful current of certainty. She put on her armor, a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue dress. She was not dressing to impress, but to command. At 11 a.m., when she and her team walked into the Vanguard boardroom, the atmosphere was polite but palpably flat. The board members looked weary, having just sat through what was likely a competent but uninspired presentation from Michael. Rosemary could feel the lingering ghost of his pitch in the air. She took her place at the head of the table, smiled warmly, and began. "Good morning," she said, her voice resonating with a quiet confidence. "We at Tidal Design believe that true innovation is a process of constant evolution. What we submitted in our preliminary proposal was a strong foundation, a starting point we were proud of, but in the weeks since we've had a significant breakthrough." She clicked a button and the screen behind her lit up, not with blueprints, but with a dynamic, flowing animation. "We'd like to present you with what we're calling Vanguard 2.0. For the next 30 minutes, she held them captive. She didn't just present, she told a story. She began by acknowledging the very concepts Michael had stolen. A central green atrium, as you may have already discussed this morning, is a wonderful concept for employee wellness, she said smoothly. We considered that in our first draft. But then we asked ourselves, what if that atrium wasn't just passive? What if it was the building's living, breathing lung key? She unveiled the biofilters, the AI-driven climate modulation, the responsive lighting that mimicked circadian rhythms. She systematically took every one of her own ideas that Michael had presented and showed them to be nothing more than the first clumsy step toward a much grander vision. You could feel the energy in the room shift from polite interest to rapt fascination. She was not just winning them over, she was making Michael's entire presentation feel antiquated and small-minded. When she concluded, a palpable silence hung in the air. The CEO, Ms. Chen, a woman known for her sharp intellect and sharper eye, leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Ms. Davies, that was an extraordinary vision. It's also curious. Mr. Brown's presentation an hour ago was, as you seem to anticipate, remarkably similar to the core ideas of your preliminary submission." This was the moment, the checkmate. Rosemary met Ms. Chen's gaze with unwavering calm. "Then I'm flattered," he agrees. "Our starting point was so strong." "A great idea is a great idea," she said, a masterclass in professional grace that simultaneously exposed Michael's lack of originality. She then added the final devastating blow. "However, the board should be aware that the Vanguard 2.0 systems we've shown you today, from the responsive architecture to the biometric wellness integrations, are all proprietary, patented, and digitally watermarked as of 4 a.m. this morning. This evolution of the design is exclusively the intellectual property of Tidal Design." The implication landed with the force of a physical impact. The board members exchanged glances. They didn't just understand, they were furious on her behalf. She hadn't just proven her design was better, she had proven Michael was a charlatan who had tried to cheat them with a pale imitation of her genius. 2 hours later, back in the tense silence of their office, the call came. They had the contract. The room erupted in a wave of cheers and relieved hugs. Rosemary leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, a genuine, unburdened smile finally gracing her lips. That night she stood with Lachlan on the terrace. The city lights, once a symbol of her failure and heartbreak, now shimmered with promise. "You did more than win today," Lachlan said softly, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You showed him and the world exactly who you are." Rosemary leaned back into his embrace, breathing in the cool night air. The frantic anger was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The ultimate victory, she realized, wasn't seeing Michael fall. It was the unshakable knowledge that she had risen entirely on her own. He hadn't just lost a contract. He had lost the chance to know the woman she had become, a woman whose worth was not a reflection of any man but a brilliant, self-sustaining light of its own. He hadn't wanted her, and for the first time she was truly, deeply grateful for it. Rosemary's journey wasn't about the revenge or even about the billionaire. It was about the incredible transformation that can happen when you stop letting someone else define your worth. She went from being a forgotten chapter in her ex-husband's story to writing a best-selling epic of her own. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most painful endings are just the beginning of a life you were always meant to build for yourself. It's a testament to the fact that true success isn't about who is standing beside you, but about the strength you find standing on your own 2 feet. If her story of resilience and self-discovery moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. What part of Rosemary's triumph resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below.